This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
When you come to a corporate partnership, that you're making a brand-to-brand alignment. So this is a company that's saying, I want to stand shoulder to shoulder with you around this particular issue or this part of this particular issue. And I want to make a difference in doing that by accomplishing X, Y, Z.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Chad Royal-Pascoe, National Vice President, Corporate and Cause Partnerships for the Boys and Girls Clubs of America. Hello, Chad. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bite.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I am very thankful that you were willing to talk to me today about corporate fundraising, especially at BGCA, the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, because they have such an amazing, or you guys there have such an amazing track record of corporate partnerships and major giving. But I was hoping that before we launch into talking about corporate partnerships, I wonder if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about how did you find your way into this career niche?
Sure. I actually almost always ask this question of other people when I meet them who've ended up in nonprofit, because there are so many varied ways to get here. And so I think that people end up coming in so many different directions that it's always interesting to be there. Somebody referred to me the other day as a veteran, and I guess now I've officially passed that point. I'm not really sure whether it was good. I'm like, it sounds like that means old to me, but it's not. But I have been within the nonprofit space for more than 20 years now. And I've worked for organizations, the American Heart Association, March of Dimes, the Hetrick Martin Institute, and now Boys and Girls Clubs of America. And before that, I actually was in retail and had been in retail for quite a while and was, successful within that with one of our current partners. It's a great experience. And I had been in retail probably since I was 16 years old in one shape or another for various companies. And I think it's a great place for you to learn structure. It's a great place as a first job. It's a great place as a career. And at the same time, I had decided that for myself, that I was looking for just a little bit more. And a company that I began working for after they were going out of business. And so I had the opportunity to just kind of look around at something new. And so I interviewed for a job at the American Heart Association, and I didn't really think that much about it at the time when I applied. And then I had an interview, and it was in Jacksonville, Florida. And then I had a second interview. And by the time that I got to the second interview, I had started to think like, I probably actually could do this. And, it is selling and selling and selling. And I felt like that's what I do every day. But I think that what has led to success within that understanding is that it was difficult for me in the very beginning with the Heart Association, because when I was at the Gap prior to that, I understood the relationship and I understood the transaction is that you give me $40 at the time, I give you a pair of jeans, right? And so I know what that transaction means. And I think that understanding that when you get into the nonprofit space, especially if you get into the corporate partnership space, is that you have to understand what is it beyond a transaction, because you're developing a partnership. And so there is more transactional fundraising, sometimes on the philanthropic side or maybe on a sponsorship side. But I think that when you're in the partnership side, like I am, is that it's much more of a relationship. It's much more of a well-rounded kind of partnership with objectives. You're making a brand-to-brand alignment. So understanding that transaction was a little bit rocky in the very beginning, but we finally got around to it.
Excellent. And I'm so glad you did, because now I can ask you about that.
Sure.
So I did a little research on you, and I saw an interview that you had done for a cause marketing agency called For Momentum, and that was back in 2017. And at that time, you mentioned that companies were really screaming for impact. I'm curious if you can give me some examples of how you've seen that play out since then, And maybe that's with BGCA, or maybe it's things in the news. Can you speak to that a little?
Yeah, I mean, it's not only a trend, but it's what I would say are table stakes now anymore for a partnership, is that it's no longer will it have impact. It's like it has to have impact. Otherwise, you're not going to get a partnership out of it. If you do happen to get a partnership that is not having measurable outcomes or not having impact, it's probably not going to last, or it is at least susceptible to going away very quickly. Gone are the days when a company would just write a check and say, hey, this is great philanthropically, it's good for the community. And that does still happen. But at the same time, I think that where you get true investments and where you get true partnerships, where you have a company that's making an investment in your organization and an investment in your mission, is that they're looking for objectives to be met that end up being an intersection of objectives that they may have as a corporation and objectives that you have as an organization. And it's really around that they want to know that they're doing good. And that another portion of that is also off of not something that just I think, but it's something that is in the news, is that what people give to today are organizations and nonprofits that are actually solving a problem. I often colloquially say to my team, and in different settings, but I think it's true within nonprofit organization as well, that I think that corporations may think to themselves like, okay, is this organization just kicking the can down the road, or are they moving the ball down the field? And so are they solving a societal problem, or are they just kind of making me aware that there is a problem? That's the difference that you have on impact, is that they want to know, what did my $3 million actually do? How did that affect your organization? And how did it do what it was supposed to according to your mission? So whether you measure that in terms of the number of youth that you serve every day, that can be a measure, or it's the number of, in the case of Boys and Girls Club, the number of youth that participated in this particular program, or the number of youth that demonstrated, let's just say, that they are healthier than they were before. They're more aware of their health than they were before, or that they can explore careers that they may never have thought were possible. Those all then become outcomes instead of just a philanthropic donation. When you get that's when companies are really willing to invest in what you're doing and the work that you're doing.
That makes a lot of sense. And you've been using the word partners and partnership. And I know for a lot of folks, the first thing they think of with companies is sponsorships. How does it work to really partner with companies? And what are the different ways, if I create a partnership, what are the different ways they might fund that partnership?
There's no one magic answer. So I think that whether you use the term sponsorship or whether it's partnership, there are different things. Most of the time, in my vernacular and in my way of thinking, that sponsorship is actually support of an event or of something that is just going to happen in kind of one instance. So that it's in support of a gala, or it's in support of a walk or run or something like that. And so your metrics behind that may be completely different, right? It may be in the networking that was available to the company in that, or the number of people that saw that company was supporting the organization, and they have a multitude of reasons. And when I began with the American Heart Association and even through March of Dimes as well, I will say that the majority of my work was done with events and event sponsorship. Those are really, really active ways to become involved, especially in your local community. And so there's a lot of structures that can determine return on investment for that within events. When you come to a corporate partnership, that you're making a brand-to-brand alignment. So this is a company that's saying, I want to stand shoulder to shoulder with you around this particular issue or this part of this particular issue, and I want to make a difference in doing that by accomplishing X, Y, Z. So those would be the differences in kind of the way that I would see it playing about within different organizations and the way that they would consider that. I will say this, is that I don't have the magic answer for this. And there are conferences that take place. Many of them I participate in or I've been part of, and you can parcel and part out the difference between cause marketing and cause branding and partnerships and sponsorships and all of those kinds of things. And there are whole conferences that are all about all of those things. But that's how mostly I consider it to be.
Okay. Well, I think that makes sense. I like the shoulder to shoulder idea that it's a company that is looking to have an impact, and that's the best partner.
Right. There have been changes within the landscape within the last 20 or so years. Now that I say it again, it still kind of cringes to me a little bit, but there have been changes within how those decisions are gone about. In many cases, is that employees are really having a say in what the company invests in, or at least a say in what they believe to be important for the company to invest in. And I also think that the company is also kind of trying to identify something that is resonant and authentic and honest, that they can speak, that it makes sense for them to be in that space. So there's a lot of pieces that go into that decision-making process.
One of the things that prospect researchers get tasked with, and especially with corporate relationships, is to just go out into the wild world and find good prospects, and even more so than individuals. I think most people realize you must have a connection to an individual before you're probably going to get a meeting. You're not going to be able to just call them cold. But companies, that's a different story. There's a little more formality there. They have giving arms. And so I'm curious, when someone like me creates a profile on paper of a company that I think is a good prospect for you, like, how do you evaluate that? How do you decide what are key points, or what are you looking for in a good corporate prospect?
There is an art and a science to doing that. And one cannot take place without the other. One of the things that we do as an organization is that, the first kind of litmus test, and we actually go through a vetting process internally before we approach a company. We do our homework and we figure out whether this is a good partner for Boys and Girls Clubs of America. And the first thing that we take a look at is, are they aligned with our mission naturally? Some are, some aren't, have a natural alignment to the mission. And we take a look at what is the potential for them to align with the mission. Is there anything that would cause us some concern about whether their stance on youth or their stance on something that may surface politically or anything like that? Because for us as an organization, especially in a very, very divided world that we live in today, is that the one thing that people can agree upon is that kids deserve a greater future and they deserve a chance at a better life. And that's really what we're around. So of course, we may look at a company and they may be very divisive, or they may have a track record of maybe taking some stances that we don't agree with. No matter what, even if we do partner with a company, we will always reserve the right to advocate on behalf of what's best for youth. And so we never give up that right, even if we do partner. But we also take a look at, do we have connections? Is the company known for being a good corporate citizen? We can look at the other things that they've done. We can look at earnings reports. We can look at all of those kinds of things and make some evaluation and come up with a determination as to whether they are a potential good company. And then from there, you can have something that looks like an amazing prospect on paper, but then you go and talk to somebody in person and you're like, this is not a fit. Or the company may list on their website that, we support youth, but they support it in a particular area that is not aligned to what our objectives are. So, not every company that says that they support youth may be a good partner for Boys and Girls Clubs of America, but it would probably pass that first hurdle right in the very beginning. And we like to say that we try to stay within our lane or our lanes, and we have many of those about providing services to our youth, but at the same time, we're very careful to not go outside of that. And so we may work with and through other organizations and with and through local partners, national partners, et cetera, to do some of the things that we do not. So, the need is greater than just what Boys and Girls Club will be able to serve. And we know that we can be a thought leader, that we can be a convener. We don't always have to be the partner, and we won't always be the partner depending upon the corporation.
That makes a whole lot of sense.
All that said is that we do actually stand a pretty good chance of being able to partner with somebody because the breadth and scope and scale of our mission and where we are.
Yes, you have a lot to offer nationally. That's for sure. Before I let you go, I'm wondering if you have
Sure.
any resources that you recommend to researchers and fundraisers who want to do a better job of corporate fundraising. And I heard you reference a conference or conferences. That would be helpful too.
Sure. So I get no kickback for anything that I'm going to say. So let me just say that. But let me also say that there are so many potential places. It is really, no matter what you boil it down to, is that it is about meeting people. So even though it's a corporation, it's still about meeting someone. It's still about developing a relationship with that person that you're meeting with. Still is about relationships, whether it's a corporation or whether it's an individual or not. And so the places where you can meet people, I think, are places where you would go to. I mean, as an organization for us, is that we regularly go to a lot of conferences, either ourselves or with our partners. So we go to Engage for Good, we go to the IEG conference, we go to the Cause Marketing Summit, we go to the Brand Partnership Forum, we go to Industry Insights, we take advantage of memberships that we have and that our partners have in things like the American Marketers Association, the Chronicle of Philanthropy. A lot of those types of events are things that we go to meet people both nationally and regionally, and Social Capital Partnerships, getting ready to go to their conference where we'll be presenting with several of our partners. And so, those are a couple of conferences that we go to on a regular basis. And then as far as research, there are a variety of tools that are out there, and certainly we use all of those. But the biggest tool that folks need to use is the actual resources and the information that's put out by the company itself. And the reason why I say that is because you go onto a company's website or you find out information from a company by doing research, is that you're discovering what they're moving to the top of the list as important to them. And so they're saying these issues are important to us, or these issues are important to our business. This is the example that I would use, is that for Boys and Girls Clubs of America, one of our large focus areas, one of our three biggest goals in our Great Futures Plan 2025, is to make sure that 100% of our kids are life ready and career ready. And many companies, in fact, almost every company that you talk to today, is worried about where is my workforce of tomorrow going to come from, and how can I make sure that they're a good workforce. So if you're doing your research on a company, is that a lot of times you may listen to their earnings report and they may talk about their earnings for 5 or 10 minutes. And then they spend 20 minutes on talking about where is my workforce of tomorrow going to come from. And in Boys and Girls Club case, is that we know that that's where we are uniquely positioned to help solve that workforce problem, because we're teaching not only the immediate skills that someone would need. When I went to school, it's like you started thinking about a career when you're 16, when your guidance counselor met with you for the first time and said, "Hey, Chad, what do you think you want to do?" Right? But that isn't the way that it is anymore, is that it goes back very, very early on as far as instincts and abilities and observed behavior back to age 6 on. And so you really start in that workforce readiness and preparedness like much earlier. You have a lot of resources at your disposal, but never skip over the one that's most in front of you, which is the resources that the company puts out there themselves.
That is so true. I'm glad to hear you say that.
Having been the person that maybe, I hope that I don't do this now in my career, but there certainly were those times, is that yes, you have to do your research. The research should give you the confidence to go in and have an open and exploratory conversation. One of the first questions that I normally ask whenever I go in and talk to a company is that, obviously I've done a lot of research. I see what you put out there and I've come up to some major themes, but can you share with me a little bit more of what I can't read, or what I may not know about that I should know before we continue our conversation?
Wow, that's bold and very authentic.
Yeah, I think, you have to get that, because it's not your kind of showcase or your stage or your platform to say, here's all of the great stuff that I found out about you, and here's my presentation that I've done without any input from you, and here's my proposal without any input from you. That's going to be your largest mistake.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I hope that it's helpful to you, and I hope that it's helpful to the listeners that are there. I I do think that I have a great job. I have a great position, both not only at Boys and Girls Club, but just as a nonprofit professional that has been so rewarding to me. I'm not retiring anytime soon, by the way. To be clear, I'm not retiring at all. But at the same time, I think it's an avenue that people should really take a look at, because they're looking at how to make a difference in the world, not only through what they do, but also through what they can do professionally.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That was Chad Royal-Pascoe, National Vice President, Corporate and Cause Partnerships for Boys and Girls Clubs of America. And for all of you prospect research professionals out there, I really hope you heard him when he suggested connecting with corporate prospects at conferences. I hadn't thought of prospecting there, although you can bet I will now. Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come check out the Prospect Research Institute's learning community. It's a membership community with powerful resources, great discussions, and comprehensive courses. Check it out at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org. I'd love to have you join me as a member of the learning community. See you there.